Hey there, and welcome to today's video. For today's video, we have yet another video game house, but I can't just say that this house is in one video game and that is it. Today, we are building HQ Residential. Now, HQ Residential House is actually an asset you can download from Unity. In case you don't know, Unity is basically a game engine where you can develop games. So HQ Residential House is actually one of the assets that you can download. Now, after downloading this house, you can basically put it into your game and do whatever it is that you want in the game with it. Now, the house comes in a couple different colors. You can have some liberty and change the colors, change the layout a bit. You can basically change whatever you want from it once you have the assets. The thing is, most people leave the house the way it is. It actually has a pretty realistic layout for what would be a typical American house. And besides that, from what I noticed while building it in The Sims, a lot of the items that are in the house itself are actually items that you would find in a typical American house. Now, that is not to say that you couldn't find this in a house from basically anywhere else in the world, but this is pretty typical American if you ask me, with the double car garage, the gigantic house, the roof lines and everything like that are very much what you would expect to see when you think of a suburban house in the States. Now, mind you, I'm up here in Canada, but you can pretty much see the same thing. At least where I live, the one difference that I would mention would be maybe not the same size. Not to say we don't have a lot of space, but I just don't think it's very typical to see a house that is this big. I think if we had to put this in square footage, this is somewhere around the 3,000 square foot. And you'll see once we get to it, but basically, a lot of the stuff that is actually in the house doesn't really make sense when you translate it to Sims at the very least. So when I speak of how big a house would be, I'm talking about this one in particular. Now, you might have seen already, we are pretty much done with the layout, and this was where I was struggling. The layout was an issue because in Sims you can't do half tiles. Garages are pretty much unusable, and with the items I knew I was going to need, particularly in the kitchen, for example, and the layout that it was asking for based on the pictures, there were areas that needed to be wider than the pictures seemed or longer than it seemed like in the pictures. Point is, there were a lot of areas that if I wanted to make it work in Sims and give it an actual workable layout, I was going to need to do some finicking around. Now, in that finicking around, since we are only building this in base game, I decided to not do the laundry room, since the laundry room is something that you need a pack for in order to build. I did leave the garage, and I kind of left it as a bit of a workshop, since that is a bit what they had it like in the pictures that I was referencing. There was also a very weird room around the front of the house that I wasn't sure what to do with, so I made it a bit of a sneaky room, and it is a dark room, the type that you would use to develop pictures. Now, does that have any use in The Sims? It does not, but it was a very long and narrow room that did not have any windows in it. So I decided to just give it some sort of use, even if it's completely imaginary. Now, as far as colors go and some of the window placements, a lot of it was left up to what I would remember from the house. Now, I've seen this house in a few games myself. The most recent one would be the open house. I would say it's most typically used whether it's an indie game, specifically indie horror. I haven't seen it in a lot outside of that, but in the open house, they do go through a lot of the house itself. I believe a lot of the pictures that are used anyways are from what you can find in the Unity asset store. Now, based off that and what I could remember from the game, that's what I based basically the rest of the layout on. For example, upstairs in the master bedroom, there are a couple different layouts that you can have, but the most typical layout is that the master bedroom will be the door to the right after you go up the stairs. And from what I could remember, on the left side there was an ensuite bathroom and a bit of a walk-in closet, which here comes in the dimensions again. If I wanted this to look like a double car garage like it was in the pictures, that also meant that the master bedroom needed to be a lot longer than I feel like it would have typically been. This is also because of the placement with the stairs and all that, so Again, a lot of this is guesstimation and trying to make it somewhat usable for Sims, even though at the end of the day, this isn't really made with Sims in mind. This is more made as a let's try to copy whatever it is that we see in these pictures and make HQ Residential a reality in Sims 4. So with that, we actually ended up with a bit of a longer everything, really. So the master bedroom itself is quite long, and the master bathroom is just a long hallway. I don't even remember if there was double vanity on that one, but I ended up putting a double vanity just to fill up the space. I actually found that it didn't seem as long as I thought it would look in The Sims, but it was still quite a long bathroom. Not to mention the walk-in closet. I don't even think that one is supposed to have a window in it, but at the end of the day, I needed to fill that room with something. So I did my best to try to get everything in there. And the same could be said pretty much about the rest of the house. I realized at some point that it was going to be an issue of, do I want to prioritize the color that it was originally? Do I want it to look sort of like it did in the pictures? What did I want to prioritize? So priority number one for me was what the outside looked like. So I made it a point of having the windows look as closely as possible to the windows that you can see in the pictures. So that meant that I needed to have specific windows that had shutters, which would be black, and that also meant that I couldn't get wider windows. So from the outside, it looks kind of like what it would for the picture, but from the inside, there are a lot of windows that I do wish they would have been bigger. But again, this came to the point of, do I want the shutters or do I want the bigger window? I ended up going for the shutters on the outside. A lot of it also did not match with the colors, so some colors were a bit darker, a bit lighter, a bit more on the neon side, for example. The texture didn't go right, so it was a lot of prioritizing what I would want in this house. Now, while a lot of the color choices I can say I would not have made, particularly with how colorful the house actually ends up being, I had never noticed. I do have to say that it does feel a lot more organic than a lot of the Sims houses that I've built. So a lot of the houses that I would build, I would typically go for a single color, and that's a color that you're going to see throughout the whole house. Take my last build for example. I ended up having a wall here and there that was blue, and I ended up basically taking that color blue and using it throughout the whole house. Now, I don't think there would be a bright orange rug in a bathroom, or I would have a bright green room, but I do see where this house was going with at least not having everything be black and white. So I can really appreciate that when it comes to building it. Aside from that, the endless struggle that everyone who builds in Sims can relate to is clutter items. There were so many clutter items that I wanted to put throughout this house and just couldn't because it just does not exist. So there were a lot of picture frames on tables or a coffee mug and stuff like that. So some of these things I would have been able to find had I gone into the debug items, but I wanted this to be a completely debug-free house. As far as the laundry room, that ended up being another bedroom, and then there was a dark room that I mentioned. So if I was able to ever renovate this house, I really do like the layout that it has. I like how everything is structured downstairs and everything is structured upstairs. But if I had the choice, I would definitely make this house smaller. We can start there. At the end of the day, I think this ended up being like a 5-bedroom house, which is ridiculous if you consider that one of the bedrooms is an office. And the red room I'm not considering as a bedroom, but if I was able to add windows wherever I wanted, I could split that up pretty well. But anyways, this is a very long video compared to the types of videos that I've been building so far. I do have screenshots coming up, so I hope you enjoy them and compare them and let me know if I did a good job or not. But I just wanted to say it's quite challenging. It's one thing doing just the layout, and it's another thing trying to get the feel of the house. It's completely another thing trying to replicate absolutely everything that a house has based on screenshots. It's not usual that you get this much material to be able to build from, and a lot of material to be able to match. But anyways, I hope you enjoyed this week's video. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video. Have a great weekend!